Good afternoon. Welcome to the Allegany County Chamber of Commerce Candidate Forum for the House of Delegates District 1C candidates for the 2018 gubernatorial primary election on June 26, 2018. I am Stu Czapski, Executive Director of the Chamber. There are 3 Republican candidates running for House of Delegates 1C, one of which will advance to the general election in November, unopposed then for 1 seat in the House. With us today are Nicole Altmyers, Jordan Lysczek, and Mike McKay. For the benefit of those viewing or listening to this forum, all candidates will be given the same question and have the same amount of time to answer each question. You will be given a notification as time expires. Additionally, we will alternate which candidate answers first. The questions were formulated by the Chamber's Legislative Committee with input from the general Chamber membership. Let's begin. Question number 1 goes first to Nicole. Tell us about yourself, why you are running for House of Delegates, and your qualifications.
Good evening. Well, first of all, I want to be your voice in Annapolis. My roots are deep in Western Maryland. I was born in Cumberland, and I grew up right outside of the city limits. I've been married for 4 years. I have 3 children, Kayla, Hunter, and Gracelyn. Back in 2008, I had the opportunity to participate in a program that's put on by the Chamber called Leadership Allegany. I saw firsthand what some of the successes were within our county, as well as some of the challenges that our county faces. From those experiences, I became more involved with various nonprofits and tried to change the face of our community. So I participated on committees such as the County United Way and Horizon Goodwill Industries. From those experiences, I decided that to make a bigger splash and change in our environment, that possibly I should run for City Council. I saw firsthand how my efforts in concert with the mayor and fellow council members can improve the lives of our citizens. I found that I enjoyed the challenges of working as a team to solve the basic problems, street crime, paving streets, and balancing the budget. We have some real successes at the city, and I want to bring those skills and experiences I have gained to the state level. I'm running because I want to improve the quality of life for our citizens by listening to their needs, by being a team player, and with other members of the delegation, and by forging partnerships with the majority party. We cannot boost Western Maryland by being isolated in Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
I'm Jordan Lysczek, and I think I'm known as the youngest candidate, but I believe I've lived in the district the longest. I'm a child of this district. I've been in Western Maryland all my life, with the exception of college, of course. There's not a law school in Western Maryland. But I did start my family here, my law practice here, and my foundation Rural Children's Fund here. I volunteer and I spend my money here. My actions speak louder than my words that I'm passionate about making the best place to live in Maryland here. Currently, I represent people one at a time. I hear about, work with, and live with the biggest issues our area faces. And I have a track record of getting things done without wasting time. That's why I'm running for office so young. I'm as compassionate as I am qualified. I have a law degree and experience getting bills passed, even when they weren't the most popular. I think Western Maryland needs a qualified and likable representative that they can trust to stand up and be a strong voice in Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
Thank you, Stu. Thank you to the Chamber for providing this opportunity for the citizens of District 1C to see the candidates and vet them. All 3 of us are very, very qualified. However, my story and how my life has prepared me for the duties of this office. I was first elected as the Allegany County Commissioner in 2010, a 4-year term where I served as president of the board. This was my first time serving as an elected official, and in 2014 I was elected to the House of Delegates, this current seat, District 1C, and have been a member since 2015. I am president and CEO of Allegany Management Services, a professional dry cleaning and restoration firm headquartered right here in Allegany County, with 2 locations in Maryland. As an independent businessman, I've owned many companies, including Effective Solutions, a telemarketing, and an employee staffing company. My first business or operation was actually Kentland Exxon Service Center in Landover, Maryland. I pursued higher education and studied business administration at the University of Maryland. I am a graduate of the Maryland Association of Academies for Excellence in Local Government, as well as Leadership Allegany. Now, during my term as in office as commissioner, I served on the Allegany County Board of Health, as well as being a member of the Cumberland Allegany County Industrial Foundation. I served on both the Allegany County Board of Education as well as MACO, serving on their legislative committee. I'm also a co-founder and past chairman of the Maryland Rural Counties Coalition, serving as their administrator. As your representative in Annapolis, your delegate, I am currently as a member of the Appropriations Committee. I am also a member of subcommittees of the Public Safety and Administration, Oversight Committee on Personnel, Capital Budget. The Speaker, Mike Bush, asked me to represent the House of Delegates on the Maryland Rural Maryland Council.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Second question goes first to Jordan. Infrastructure is a concern in your district and across the state. While there has been some relief for the counties, what will you do in Annapolis to work for increased funding for infrastructure maintenance and improvements?
Improving our infrastructure will make us more attractive to employers, and the whole state has a vested interest in every district's economic growth. Part of the larger transportation budget, when we look at the big picture of how the state operates, the urban areas think they should receive large parts of the budget for public transportation, and we obviously think it needs to go towards roads and infrastructure here in Western Maryland. A delegate needs to understand and prepare for these competing interests so that Western Maryland isn't forgotten about or ignored for the sake of pleasing the urban parts of the state. Personally, I want to see our district getting as much attention as Baltimore, PG, Montgomery counties. So I plan on putting my negotiation skills to use to make sure we get our slice of the pie and we're receiving a fair share of the budget for our infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
So as it talks of infrastructure, our area highly needs to make sure that our highway user funds are returned. Back in 2009, the highway user funds were rated by then Governor O'Malley, and the counties and the municipalities were cut drastically. Matter of fact, in the little town of Luke, their highway user fund check equate to approximately $239. You cannot even fill a pothole for $239. So as our term as a commissioner, and then as the House of Delegates, we've been fighting to restore the highway user funds down in Annapolis. This year, there was a bill. We're glad that it did restore some of the funds for the highway user funds. However, the problem is that it has a sunset and will be expiring in 4 years. Unfortunately, we'll need to go down and fight to make sure that those highway user funds remain and make sure that those funds are not going to mass transit. In the state of Maryland, we are the only state that provides funding for mass transit out of our highway user funds, and that is not necessarily fair to the state. So I look forward to working with the other delegates in the House and then in the Senate to make sure that we can have permanent highway user revenue secured.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Well, towns like Cumberland, Hancock, Williamsport, they have an old history, but with an old history comes crumbling infrastructure. And when you have mandates coming down from the state, like MDE with the separating of sewage and stormwater treatment expenditures, we need to be mindful of those mandates and look at ways to alleviate the burden on our towns, municipalities, and counties. One of those ways I'm pleased to say that I testified on was the Bay Restoration Fund allocation that is now allowing folks like the City of Cumberland to alleviate the burden for the funding for their project that they're doing. The Highway User Fund, I'm pleased to say, while I served on the Maryland Municipal League Legislative Committee, I went down there several times and testified for full restoration of those funds. And it looks to me like it's coming back to fruition in the next coming years. But we also need to be proactive. It's not just our roads and bridges. infrastructure is also broadband. It's also having shovel-ready projects. So when I think of that, I think about state funding for design engineering, so that when the federal government, they're rolling out some of these big infrastructure upgrades and such, that we are ready for them. We are one of the first with our hands out saying, we have our projects designed, send it to Allegany County. And when it comes to the communications and such, I think, with the governor has just did with the broadband coalition, I think that we're in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Question number 3 goes first to Mike. Do you agree with the perception that Maryland is not a business-friendly state? Considering recent paid leave legislation, tax changes, and proposed increases to minimum wage, what specific legislation would you recommend to correct this situation?
Well, certainly under the O'Malley administration, we were definitely labeled not a very friendly business state. Under Governor Hogan, we have done our best to change that perception. However, being only in the executive branch, Larry Hogan, the legislative branch has brought bills that have been actually detrimental to business, whether it be the minimum wage, whether it be those things that are burdensome and regulations. What I firmly believe is that we need to make sure that state government is out of the business to allow the locals to make the decision. Being a former county commissioner, I believe that the locals know exactly what needs to happen. And I bring exactly the State Highway Administration. District 6, we proposed to the State Highway Administration that Tony Crawford and his group go ahead and make decisions when it comes to permitting for access roads, as well as making those decisions not in Baltimore, but in Allegany County. So that's something that we actually did as a delegate, and making sure that happened. Senator Edwards and myself suggested that. We made that for our jurisdiction, and then they made that statewide. So more ideas such as that, so that the locals can make the decision they know best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Well, it's no secret the Maryland legislature is controlled by the Democratic Party by essentially a 2-to-1 margin. As a result, we get laws like mandated sick leave and an increased minimum wage. These kind of bills are veto-proof. That is the reality that we face as Republicans. However, there is another alternative, and I guess it's how do we face it? And for example, House Bill 476, the Second Chance Act provides a small tax credit for employers who hire a person who is in a drug diversion court program. So this is a non-violent offender, and basically we're saying for folks like, for example, if it was a construction company and they're needing additional employees and they hire additional employees to complete a task, a job, they're going to be rewarded by hiring these non-violent offenders and giving them a second chance or a purpose. So when we have tools out there, we can't change what's been mandated and sent down, but we can come up with some creative alternatives to help our businesses. Unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, it passed 128 to 8. Delegates Buckle and Beitzel voted for the bill, but we need more things to help alleviate it. It's similar to Senate Bill 134, which was the small business tax relief. So I just think we need to think of creative solutions.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
Our government definitely overregulates small businesses, all businesses, but small businesses, I think, feel the squeeze more than others. And we definitely feel it here in Western Maryland, where we're a lot closer to our neighbors of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, which are a little bit more business-friendly, and businesses leave our area to go to these less regulated states. Now, we all want economic growth and locals that are able to earn a decent living without a 2-hour commute at the same time. So it's important that the actions that we take to improve the economy are well thought out. We don't necessarily want to see fly-by-night businesses and large companies coming in that don't pay employees a living wage. I am to encourage smart and encourage sustainable growth that will work for Western Maryland for years to come. One of the primary things I'd like to see happening locally, and with us being a smaller community, we would probably be able to pull this off. Businesses and schools working together so that we can ensure our students are ready to contribute to a strong workforce and have a hard-working ethic, and they're ready to stay and contribute to the Western Maryland economy.
Thank you, Jordan. Question number 4 goes first to Nicole. What are your thoughts on the implementation of medical marijuana in the state to this point, and your position on the legalization of marijuana for recreational use?
Well, as it stands right now, we're creating jobs. I've seen in other states where they've been able to, in a manner with the facilities, conduct it in some ways better than some of our correctional institutions as far as security and stuff. So I think that when it comes to using medical marijuana as an economic development project, I think we're seeing firsthand the benefits here locally, and I support those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
First, I'd like to say that the way we've implemented medical marijuana in our state has been kind of a mess. It's moving in a good direction, but the state has unnecessarily delayed the whole process, which has at one point even led to some early layoffs, but I think we're recovering from that. I understand there are a lot of differing feelings out there on the subject, and one of the most common concerns I hear is that legalization in any capacity will result in more people using drugs and more people driving under the influence. Statistically, though, those claims don't hold much water given the data available to us out of other states. And medical marijuana states have even seen a decrease in opioid users. It's actually looking like a promising alternative to opiates in the medical community. Personally, I think the medical marijuana industry has the potential to create a lot of jobs and boost the economy. However, it shouldn't necessarily be politicians arguing over this and making the decision. The people should be the ones to decide the issue directly by referendum. Let the voters determine the most appropriate marijuana laws for the state. That's whose opinion matters most.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
As history will dictate and other states get into the medical marijuana industry, Maryland will not be the forefront or the book that people read on how to implement. The Medical Marijuana Commission, unfortunately, was interjected with politics, and their double-blinded application actually was a detriment to even the town of Williamsport in losing a grower in Williamsport. But I'm glad to say that the General Assembly this year did pass for additional licenses and to allow these organizations who had already submitted, if they're still interested, to be put in. So hopefully within 1C we'll have another medical marijuana facility. There's no doubt about it, what medical marijuana can do for seizures in children, cancer patients, has proven to be beneficial. And I certainly believe in an economic depressed area that we need these jobs. Our people want to be able to help each other, and I think it's a good thing. As it talks about recreation, I'm strongly against legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes, for the simple reason that we have a young medical marijuana industry, a fledgling. We need to make sure that the people who have invested many, many millions of dollars can get to the people who are hurting, and we need to make sure that we don't do an end run or do anything that compromises that. So I'm definitely against recreational marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Question number 4 goes first to Nicole. Oops. See, I'm the most nervous one of all 4 of us. So if I can screw this up enough, I'll make you guys feel comfortable. But I apologize. Question number 5 goes first to Jordan. No one is immune from the nationwide opioid crisis. How do you feel it should be addressed to minimize its effect in District 1C?
The opioid crisis is a huge problem that affects everyone in Western Maryland, whether it's directly or indirectly. It's imperative that we get a handle on the issue, and we can't waste any time doing it. Not only is it a healthcare issue, it's overburdening our first responders, costing taxpayers, and driving people away from the area. Some believe that we can just arrest our way out of the problem, throwing everyone in jail. Sadly, though, we found that simply doesn't work to solve the problem. It actually exacerbates it, and it's incredibly expensive for our taxpayers when we have jails that are filled to the brim because we haven't thought through what we're going to do. Washington and Allegany County are actually both creatively responding to the problem. I'm Justice Reinvestment Representative for Washington County with the state legislature, and Washington County has even established a day reporting center, which I think is a model for the entire state. In a nutshell, the program saves money as opposed to incarceration and shows promising stats for getting people off drugs, keeping them off drugs, and seeing that they become productive working members of the community, which is the most important thing because we want productive working people in our part of the state. When we treat the opioid crisis like the healthcare epidemic that it is, it truly benefits the whole area, and yet we're not going soft on crime and pretending the problem doesn't exist.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
Thank you. So the opioid crisis is definitely our most pressing issue that we have within our District 1C, Western Maryland, the state, and the nation. It is definitely a healthcare crisis, but what we need to really focus upon is the people and how they're hurting. Why are they turning to heroin, opioids, those things? What are they escaping? A couple different things that we've done is we've actually held a town hall forum at Allegany College that had to talk about preventing suicide and having people deal with the evils that are going in their heads, and they're talking about suicide and turning to whether it be alcohol, whether it be tobacco, or heroin or opioids. Second of all, there isn't just one single bullet that's going to take this issue. It's going to take a community to come together in many different facets. One thing that I found out with the passage of a pilot program, Medicaid adult dental benefits, that in the state of Maryland we are spending $14 million in our emergency rooms for Medicaid patients on dental, and they receive almost zero services when they're there. But what they can get is an opioid-based prescription. Now, we don't have the data to show how many are actually being prescribed, but the Western Maryland health system is having a downturn in those prescriptions. And what I hope to see is that pilot program as an example of how we will help those kick the opioid crisis.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
It's unfortunate that we're even facing this opioid crisis, but all of us are, either we know somebody that's been affected by it, it's been a family member. As I've been walking the streets and talking to individuals, I've heard firsthand countless stories. And the way that I see it is there's three goals that we need to tackle. One is to stop creating the addicts. 2 is to shut down drug dealers. And 3 is to help addicts recover. To hit on goal number 1, there's lawsuits currently against the big pharmaceutical companies. Maryland is partnering, Maryland and the local governments are partnering with those lawsuits. Then I look at the new Maryland prescription tracking law. That's also going to address number 1 of stop creating the addicts. Up until this year, it was voluntary for doctors and pharmacies to track their prescriptions. Now it's going to be mandatory. But I think that we need to take a regional approach to this because as I was touting what we've accomplished this year, I had an individual said that that's great, Nicole, but that doesn't work on our side of the state because you have Pennsylvania and Maryland, which is Pennsylvania and West Virginia, which is 4 miles through, so they can get prescriptions here in Maryland and then go over to West Virginia and get them. So we need to think of a regional approach to this. We need to have more law enforcement resources, longer sentences. That's going to hit on shutting down the drug dealers. Goal number 3 is probably the hardest one, and that's to help addicts recover. We need more state money for the drug diversion court, and we need a law that's like in Florida that allows families to force addicts into assessment and treatment. Now addicts can just walk away. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next question goes first to Mike. School safety and security is also a national concern. What are your thoughts on school resource officers, other security measures? How do we pay for it? And similarly, what are your thoughts on the mental health component in our schools?
So school safety is at the forefront of everyone's mind. No one wants to go into either a university, go into a community college, or within their own K through 12 and be fearful that something's going to happen. My feeling on the SROs, or the school resource officers, is that we need to do our best to make sure that we have all the funding that needs to be for that. Back as a commissioner, we offered, when I worked with the Allegheny County Board of Education, to help with some funding with that. I believe it was about $135,000 that we put towards that. That in itself is not enough to put one officer in every school. If a bill that was entertained in the General Assembly this past year was to put a school resource officer in every single school. Unfortunately, that was over $200 million. That was not help. But under Governor Hogan's leadership, he's added $40 million for school safety. The Appropriations Committee that I sat on during the NOTS Commission, which has to do with school construction, we added another $10 million in for hardening of our schools, whether that be metal detectors. The locals will make that decision, and it will also for the school safety. As it talks for mental health, that is our number one issue. Whether it be opioids, whether it be school shootings, whether it be people that cannot hold down a job, the 800-pound gorilla is mental health, and we need to be concerned with our families, our friends, and our residents within District 1C to have the conversation on how we fix people and help them get better.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Keeping our children safe is a core mission of our government at all levels. Local schools are run by an elected school board, and they're funded in part by the county government. State has a limited role to play when it comes to what happens in our local schools. But I say there's some things that we can help, though, when it comes to school safety. I think we can share some best practices in school design to make our schools safer. We can do that with new construction as well as renovation of older buildings, maybe retrofit. We can establish a funding mechanism for the school renovations. But I do believe firmly that we need to provide a school safety resource in every school. In doing that, though, I believe that the running of that resource program should be ran by the highest law enforcement officer in the county, which would be the sheriff. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
I'm a mom. I have a son getting ready to start Hancock Elementary School, which is an open design school without walls on every classroom. And I know there are a lot of schools throughout our district and state that are set up that way. I think the argument over gun regulation that popped up as a result of, concerns over school safety was a knee-jerk response to the issue of school safety. Looking at the statistics from the O'Malley-era gun regulations that our state implemented, it doesn't show much promise. They certainly didn't reduce gun violence in Baltimore, and that seemed to be the main aim. That being said, I'm happy that you talked about mental health, and it seems like we're all in agreement that mental health is at the root of this problem. So talking about guns, simple, black and white, one solution to this will not solve the problem. We've got to have a real dialogue about all the issues, and that will include mental health, it will include parenting, it will include improving maybe the infrastructure of our schools so that they have walls or locking doors. School resource officers, after the Great Mills incident, seemed like a really good idea to have in place. That incident could have been so much worse than it was. However, that was in a fairly lucrative part of the state where that happened, and I know it would fall on local governments to support that. So we've got to sit down and talk about how we can protect our students, but do it in a financially feasible way.
Thank you, Jordan. Next question goes first to Nicole. Considering Republicans are the minority party in Annapolis, how can individual members of the Western Maryland delegation obtain leadership roles in the state legislature? How will you work toward such a role?
That's a great question. First of all, I want to touch base with the mental health that you brought up in the last question. I'm going to use my time a little bit to address that. I don't believe that we can legislate our way out of that. I do believe that we need to have programs educating our youth on how to deal with their emotions, how to report things, because a lot of this comes down to bullying and such. So just to touch base on that. And in regards to the question of, if I heard you right, how would I secure a leadership position?
Correct.
Downstate? I believe that my history at the city level would adequately show how I've done just that. I was appointed to, well, I was on the board of directors for the Maryland Municipal League, and I was the co-chair for the legislative committee. Given that experience, I realized that I had to work across the aisle. I had to be very mindful of what issues they were facing as well as we were facing and find a common ground. I think it takes that mindset to further yourself downstate. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
Also, I'd like to say, great question. A representative is supposed to advocate for everyone, not just a small subgroup of people. Partisan bickering leads to government shutdowns and ineffective government in general. It's a poor excuse for politicians not to do their job. I have a business, and being in business sometimes means I have to work with people that I disagree with. The customer's always right. Service with a smile. I have to listen whether I like it or not. It's part of being a business owner, and it's part of being an adult. When I'm challenged with a partisan issue or people not wanting to work across party lines, I try to approach it as a mediator. I know where my values lie. I listen and ask questions to try to understand other people's point of view, and contrary to popular belief, even people with different ideas often share a lot of values that we can agree on. I try to find that common thread and move forward from there. Law and politics, to be effective and fair, are always a balancing game. A true statesman, as opposed to just a politician, can maintain their integrity, stay true to their values, and still be balanced and fair. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be representing people because you're just in it to push your own agenda and you're not there to serve.
Thank you, Jordan.
Sure.
Mike?
Thank you. Yes, it is true that all three of us are in the minority party down in Annapolis, but that doesn't mean that we're in the ineffective party. As we talk about getting into leadership, when Delegate Buckle, Delegate Beitzel, and myself were elected, we all agreed that Delegate Buckle would be our chair of the district. We also believed that Delegate Buckle would be our best advocate to rise through the ranks in the Maryland the Republican caucus. And we support Delegate Buckle and what he does there. What I've done is gone a little bit different for leadership. This year I've just been named the vice chair of the Washington County delegation. We do represent 2 counties here in District 1C. But we also need to be able to work across party lines, and I'm proud to say that Speaker Mike Bush put me on the Joint Committee to End Homelessness. I'm the only Republican, I'm the only Western Maryland, and I'm telling you that as a fiscal conservative, having those ideas into the discussion on how we're going to end homelessness in the state of Maryland, which is a state of Maryland problem, is very, very effective. Second of all, in Appropriations Committee, just recently last year, I was named to the subcommittee on the capital budget. There's only 11 in the House of Delegates that are on that, and 2 of them are from Western Maryland, Delegate Beitzel and myself. So leadership does matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next question goes first to Jordan. The school funding formula is a topic of consideration for the Kerwin Commission. What specific areas of school funding would you like to see addressed to ensure equitable funding for schools across the state?
If we want to keep and attract quality citizens in our part of the state, we've got to have stellar educational outcomes. If we want to keep and attract businesses, we've got to have stellar educational outcomes. If you want to see a genuine reduction in crime and a productive workforce, you could probably guess what I'm going to say, we've got to have stellar educational outcomes. Educating our youth is an investment in our future, period. However, we have to balance the budget too. We can't go crazy with it. I understand that some of the initial requests would have really cost the state a lot and would have cost local governments even more. That being said, having an alliance between our business community and our school systems is very important to me. I mentioned it earlier. We want to have a hardworking student population that goes out and joins the Western Maryland workforce. I like the idea that Allegany County has implemented with the Opportunity Scholarship, scholarships for students that do promise to stay in the area or in our Western Maryland workforce for a certain amount of time. That way, the investment, we're assured, stays in our area. We've got to do what we can to keep working, educated youth in Western Maryland so they can contribute to the economy, raise healthy families, and keep the area alive. That's the way it used to be around here in the 70s, 80s, and before. It was a vibrant, bustling area and a good place to have a family. I think we can get back to that with some smart educational policies.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
So school funding, in the state of Maryland is the only state in the union that actually requires in its constitution to provide a public education. So school education and school funding is paramount in one of our 3 pillars. One of the things that come from the Kerwin Commission is going to be almost a price tag of $4 billion, a tremendous amount. However, we need to figure out a way to pay for it. First of all, one of the things that I like about the Kerwin Commission is that fund is having a change. Instead of funding being per pupil, it'll be per school, meaning you'll get X amount of dollars for an elementary school, X amount for a middle school, and X amount for a high school. This will be able to protect our areas against consolidation when consolidation is decided on funding dollars and having the funding dollars from the state follow the children. In Hancock, they're looking at a different way. Unfortunately, Hancock's numbers are dropping, just similar that we had with our Little Orleans students, and how those communities were pulled apart when families were going to work at, say, Hagerstown, and then having to send their children to Cumberland. We need to look for additional funding sources, such as what we did as when I was commissioner in Allegany County in creating the Opportunity Scholarship Fund. We were able to provide dollars for AC and FSU for those in Allegany County, and those funds were derived from the monies that the county got from the Rocky Gap Casino. That's how we find out different ways to make sure that funding is available in a very, very large, voluminous bill called Kerwin.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Well, I think the governor gets it. He just announced what he was planning to do for the state of Maryland in regards to community colleges and such. So I think he gets that education is a significant component when it comes to economic development. The state has done an outstanding job of funding places like Frostburg State University, but I think that we need to do more for Allegany College of Maryland and technical training and certifications. They're very important to today's careers. more partnerships such as the PTech program. The Chamber did an outstanding job partnering with the Board of Education, Allegany College of Maryland, Frostburg State, but also with the employers. We recognized that there was a need within our community, that our employers were seeking outside of our community instead of our own youth and our own population. And I think that if we look at things like the CADE formula, it didn't pass this year, but the CADE formula would have provided $338,000 to Allegany College of Maryland. This would be something that would be positive for the technical training at that community college level. But to summarize it, I think we need to take a look at that, business partnerships and the funding for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next question goes first to Mike. What are your thoughts on the effectiveness of economic development efforts of the Maryland Department of Commerce in District 1C? Similarly, what are your thoughts on the structure and effectiveness of county and municipal economic efforts? Are there changes you would suggest?
Certainly. Economic development is going to take care of our number one asset, and our number one asset is the people of District 1C, the residents. Economic development is going to be able to give them jobs that they'll be able to stay in the area, raise a family, and hopefully retire. As it talks to the Maryland Department of Economic Development, they're doing a really, really good job of reaching out under the Hogan administration. But I will tell you, we are disjointed in Allegany County, whether it be through the City of Cumberland, the county commissioners, the numerous organizations that tout economic development, and we need to be able to bring them all together. So what I'm hoping to see in the future is some form of an umbrella, that an umbrella organization would be the clearinghouse, that all of these entities that show the economic development flag would come together and clear house, so that when we spoke to Annapolis, we spoke with one voice. I do believe that we're in the process of changing that. I'm glad to see that the county commissioners are doing an overall economic plan mirroring some of what they've done in the city of Cumberland. We should be able to take those together, create an umbrella program, so that, and we're at the state of Maryland, the delegation is fighting for the number one priorities, not individual priorities.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Economic development really ties everything together. To attract new business, you need to have a trained, drug-free workforce. You need good roads. You need a fair tax system, and you need regulations that can be flexible. You need superb teamwork between the city, county, and state development officials. I look at some of the things that's come down from the state, One Maryland. That's a plus, especially since Delegate Buckle helped to alter that to make it more conducive to our area, or should I say update it. The More Jobs for Marylanders Act, I think that's a positive as well. I look at what the city has done, and I'm very proud to say that I was a part of that process. Not only did we conduct a study, as everybody says they're tired of hearing about studies, we actually came out with a plan and we implemented it. And I think the city deserves a lot of credit to that. You look at projects such as Rolling Mills and Baltimore Street, and I totally support their efforts, and I think that we need to keep moving forward in those directions.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
I want to see our economy continue to grow, and I say continue because I do think we're already starting to move in the right direction. Our local economy is improving. We still need to address several things: the opioid crisis, infrastructure, an educated workforce. All of the things that have been mentioned so far are part and parcel of continuing down the path that we're going down. One of the greatest economic development tools that I've seen in Hancock that I'm really proud of was the rail trail. And I own a business that doesn't directly benefit from the rail trail. However, I indirectly benefit from it. I see locals using the trail year-round. The traffic on the canal is busy just about year-round, and businesses have popped up. So even though I don't particularly work within the tourism industry, I serve businesses that do work within the tourism industry. The canal's part of our history, and I like seeing local government build upon what we already have, what already makes us unique. It brings a lot of business to the area, and when that happens, they don't just use the canal, they eat here, they visit shops, they spend money in the area. Businesses that serve the touring industry, the tourism industry, need the service of other businesses out there. Most of us are proud of the history of our area and its natural beauty. I'd rather build upon the attractive features we already have in order to grow our economy, rather than pour a bunch of money into turning Western Maryland into another urban area of the state.
Thank you, Jordan. Next question goes first to Nicole. District 1C covers both Allegany and Washington counties. Compare and contrast your priorities specific to each county.
Well, I guess the best way to address this is at any level, local, state, or federal. I would say the most important thing as a leader is probably looking at this budget, because if you can't adequately fund what your priorities are, then you're not really going to accomplish too much. So, as with any leader, it encompasses jobs, tax credits, infrastructure, education, public safety. The budget also establishes our priorities based on the needs of our community. If everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So for me, job creation and tax incentives for employers, I think that they will be willing to invest in our community if we're willing to invest in them. Funding for resources to combat the opioid epidemic. It's critical, it's a no-brainer, it's a game changer as well. We have to do that. And also funding to upgrade and improve our infrastructure needs through Western Maryland. With any budget, I think we have to be mindful of putting measures in place for accountability and demanding auditing to be sure that we are getting the results that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
While there are some big differences between Washington County and Allegany County as a whole, the way our district is laid out, unlike some of the other districts in our state, is actually well planned. This district covering from portions of Cumberland through Williamsport, we are all facing a lot of the same problems in that region. As it was mentioned before, things like the opioid crisis, all these issues that we face are a lot more regional than we care to admit sometimes. So that being said, I'm really interested in encouraging small government in Maryland. I know we're not necessarily known for that, but government should be as localized as possible. Localized small government is more effective, period. It's more responsive to the needs of the citizens, and ideally the representatives can be more reflective of the people of the district. It's the way our country was set up for a reason. And I'd like to keep a lot of our decisions localized like that. That being said, when it comes to taxes in the budget, a lot of District 1C residents feel as if we are overtaxed and underfunded. Our median income is a little bit lower in our district than the state as a whole, and yet we're taxed the same. And also, the biggest chunks of the state budget tend to go towards the big 5 counties in the middle that are more populated. So a District 1C representative needs to have their eye on local government all the time and be able to speak up down the road and make sure our area is not ignored.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
So District 1C, 52% of it is in Washington County, 48% is in Allegany County, and the priorities for each county could be nothing but total stark difference. It is true that Cumberland and Williamsport do deal with a lot of the exact same things, but not the same as Old Town Flintstone and, say, Hancock. Throw in Clear Spring, where you have a lot of people that are traveling into Hagerstown for jobs. So the priority for Allegany County, to me, would be one voice. to speak from one voice for economic development. And in Washington County, the priority is to make sure that all parts of Washington County are included. Unfortunately, Hancock feels, and I've seen it, that they seem to be on the short end of the stick. Right now, there's an issue going on with education and the issues with the ag teacher problem, and it just seems that every time when there's a shortfall, we're going to take it from the residents of Hancock. As the District 1C representative, I prepared a 90-day report. This 90-day report tells exactly of every single bill during the past 90 days in session, and it's a bill on how I voted on every single bill. Why I bring this up is that each year, and every year that I've served in the House of Delegates, I've gone to every city meeting as well as town meeting, as well as county commissioners meeting, to give the local elected representatives the issues of the 90 days of how their voice in Annapolis voted. And I think taking those priorities of each individual county, making sure that we have good relationships with those elected officials is how we can make sure that those priorities, which are stark difference, get obtained.
Thank you, Mike. Next question goes first to Jordan. With the Canal Place Preservation and Development Authority and its assets under review, what is your vision for the structure and role of the authority in Allegheny County?
I mentioned this just a few minutes ago. The canal's part of our history. It brings business to the area. Some say that focusing on tourism does nothing for the locals. As I mentioned earlier, that hasn't been my experience. Instead of trying to change the geography and try to build new things and put a lot of money into building new things, I think we should restore and build upon what we already have and what has already drawn people to our area for decades. Most of us are proud of our history and its natural beauty. Let's continue to build upon these attractive features as they have done at Canal Place. That's definitely a beautiful part of Cumberland. It seems to be well thought out. And I think that should be continued throughout the entire district. Don't turn us into a city. Let us stay the way we are, and we can find ways to turn that into an economic development tool.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
So Canal Place is very important to the city of Cumberland. But as Jordan has mentioned, the canal in general is the one thread that threads everything within the District of 1C. Our residents play on the canal. Our residents have benefit from tourism that comes in, so it is an integral part. Canal Place, we've put in, I believe, over $42 million of federal and state money into Canal Place, and it needs help. And it needs help in its business plan. And that's why I'm proud that I sponsored a bill that we would pull together the team to alter the mission of Canal Place, decouple it from the actual management of the properties, and allow the certified, the heritage area to be just like the other 12 heritage areas in the state that don't manage properties. So it's important. Now, we are not talking about putting up residential homes. We're not talking about reconstitution, but like any business plan that needs to be revisited, that's what we've done by this bill. I firmly believe that the delegation, along with this idea of having one great umbrella, Canal Place will become part of that one voice that I think needs to be in Annapolis as we go down asking for funding for our area to make our economy stronger and better for the people that live in 1C.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Well, I can speak to this because I've seen the direct benefits of Canal Place, being the director of sales and marketing at the Fairfield Inn from the inception of the Fairfield until my departure in 2015. And I also served as the president on the Mount Maryland Trails Board. I can tell you that that is the hub for our recreational area. And to give you a little bit, some numbers, a recent study showed that Cumberland has over 67,000 users of the Gap every year. So when you're looking to attract something, I think the best thing is if we already have them come into the area, why not build upon that? And I think that the great resource that we have is sitting right behind that hotel in Canal Place, which is that river. I look at that river project and I see the potential of what it could be for our area. I know that the average GAP user spends $250 a day within our area. To me, that's a big deal. So I think that we need to stop doing these countless studies on Canal Place. I think that we probably spend more on them than the state actually spends on investing and doing what we need to do to help them thrive. It's not attractive when you have people that are putting out studies there to tell you why you shouldn't invest in that area. And when you look at the cost, the state spends less than $150,000 a year, less the tax revenues it's generated to create jobs. So I think that we need to continue investing and stay the course.
Thank you, Nicole. We have two more questions before we go to closing remarks. This next question goes to Mike first. What is your opinion of the current disbursement of gambling funds and the effectiveness of the local development councils? Would you suggest changes?
So as county commissioner, we were the ones that set up the original local development council, and we kind of put the horse before the cart. We found out that legislation needed to have the development council, and the commissioners had already entered into an MOU with Allegany College and FSU as it talks about the Commissioners Opportunity Scholarship Fund. That was a 5-year commitment. I sit on the Local Development Council, and I have stated at many of those meetings that once the MOU had been exhausted, it was fair game that we should all talk about how those funds are going to be dispersed. It's important that we did add in legislation, I believe it was 2 years ago or last year, a bill that would cut out 20% to go to local municipalities in a grant program and allow, that means all the municipalities and towns and organizations within Allegheny County to fund that. So I'm open to changing that once the MOU is done, and I believe this year is the last year for that MOU, and support it. It's very, very important that Allegheny County, where Rocky Gap sits, that everybody in Allegheny County benefits from that. I must say that the town of Hancock, through their medical marijuana ownership, 5%, is actually looking to use the Opportunity Scholarship Fund in Allegheny County and create a local development council to take some of their funds to actually pay for education as well. So it's a model that has been taken now to the next step into Hancock.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
Would you repeat the question for me, please?
What is your opinion of the current disbursement of gambling funds and the effectiveness of the local development councils? Would you suggest changes?
First of all, I don't think that it's shared evenly throughout the state, throughout the county, should I say, with all the key players. I know when we were looking at what it was intended to do, when I think about it from an economic standpoint, because we're looking at job growth and infrastructure needs, the city of Cumberland, we were getting calls all the time to go out there for ambulance, fire, etc. So when I look at things like that, and we're expanding our services into the county, I think that we need to think of a bigger picture of where those funds need to go for resources such as infrastructure and economic development opportunities. So I think that we need to revisit that.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
I also think there need to be some changes to how that's operated. One, we have a lot of needs in our area. We talked a little bit ago about education and how there's a big budgetary request and some question as to how local governments are going to pull that off. Steering funds where they're needed, having that degree of flexibility is important for our area, and it also needs to stay in our area and not go anywhere else throughout the state. The local development councils, I've benefited. I've worked directly with Tri-County Council, and they're doing a good job. They are an excellent resource for our area. I think that they can be expanded upon. I think maybe working a little bit more across county lines, Washington County, Allegany County, maybe even Garrett County, working together so that we have a regional economic development plan and we're not all trying to compete with one another, really. So that being said, we could steer funds where they're needed. I don't think it all needs to go back into business development. Mike mentioned about how some of it has been set aside for grants, which is a good idea because there are plenty of other needs, and I think we definitely can work together a little bit better as a regional economic development group.
Thank you, Jordan. Our final question before closing remarks goes first to Nicole. How can Maryland be a true leader in energy production, balancing all forms of energy, including coal, wind, gas, solar, and hydro across the state?
Stop legislating and regulating. The regulations and such that keep coming down and the mandates that we're forced with, we really do need to come up with a more proactive way to approach this situation. When I look at coal, the fracking, wind, I think that we need to offer incentives to businesses and also to our residents, quite frankly, on how we can, alleviate some of the burdens that come along with that.
Thank you, Nicole. Jordan?
Contrary to popular belief, it's possible to protect our environment and promote economic growth simultaneously. I know these two ideas get pitted against one another sometimes, but I don't think it has to be. I'm not sure when being pro-environment or green or caring for what we have in our surroundings got labeled as liberal or hippie or tree hugging or any of the negative connotations that I hear today. My great-grandparents had a different word for it. They called it being self-sufficient. They were gardeners, they were frugal, they made their own clothes, they canned vegetables and dried their clothes outside on a line. And no one called them names, they were smart. They didn't believe in waste. I think when we steered away from some of those ideals, we did the entire country a disservice. Now, I'm not saying we have to go back to the same way we were in the 1930s, 40s. We have to be creative. Most of us would take the uncommercialized country feel of Western Maryland over the asphalt jungle of the city, and I don't want to sell out the lifelong residents of this area by tearing down our forest in order to build strip malls. One of the key features of Western Maryland, if you ask anyone that lives here or has grown up here, is the beauty of our geography. We're an outdoorsman's dream, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I think we can balance these competing energy interests for the good of our state, for the good of the people in our state, without destroying our geography at the same time.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
So the number one way that Maryland can be a true leader in energy production is to get out of the way. I support all forms of energy. We need to really make sure that we're not picking winners and losers and passing laws that prop up one form of energy over the other. There's no doubt about it, our greatest natural resource is the people who live within District 1C. Those people are the people that we need to care about for getting jobs, and whether that jobs are from coal, whether those jobs are from wind, whether they're from solar, whether from whatever form of energy that we end up trying to cultivate, we need to make sure that we do not pick winners and losers. Government needs to stay out of it and allow the free market to be the wind of change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. It's now time for closing remarks. You will have up to 2 minutes for these as well. And we will begin with Jordan.
All right. I've spent a lot of time listening to the people of the district. It's my job, actually. I think I have a pretty good idea of how the district feels. I also know the law. I know the system and how it works. I have to. I see the problems, and it's not in my blood to see problems and not do something about it. I'm a fighter. My daughter was murdered 8 years ago. I never thought anything like that would happen to me, or in Hancock for that matter, but it did, and frankly, it lit a fire under me, as my grandparents would say. I haven't stopped fighting since. I put my heart and soul into my community because the community was there for me when my life was turned upside down. I have a vested interest in District 1C, and I'll do what it takes to make this the best place to live in the entire state. I'm a listener, a fighter, a skilled negotiator, driven and compassionate, and I think that's the kind of representative District 1C needs.
Thank you, Jordan. Mike?
Thanks again to the Chamber for providing this opportunity for everyone in Allegheny and both Washington County to hear what 3 qualified candidates can offer for the next 4 years as their representative in Annapolis. I'd like to take this time to tell you what we've done in the last 4 years. I've served on the front lines in Annapolis, helping Governor Hogan deliver 4 consecutive common sense budgets that provided record funding for education, slow growth of state spending, and included no new taxes. We responded to the community's most pressing needs by advocating the increased funding for the Safe Streets program, a fight against the opioid heroin epidemic, economic development, and infrastructure programs in Western Maryland. We held the line against tax hikes, stood up against the tax and spend liberals, and kept my promise never to support a bill that has a tax increase. Constantly fighting for our shared conservative values, I have received highest rating from groups like the NRA, Maryland Right to Life, the American Conservative Union, and the Maryland Business for Responsive Government. During the most recent legislation, I voted against the red flag bill, which infringes upon our Second Amendment rights. I voted against a bill that provided taxpayer-funded scholarships to illegal immigrants, voted for an amendment that would take our taxpayers' money away from the fund of the Attorney General, who uses it to sue the Trump administration, and led the fight to implement term limits for an out-of-touch congressmen and senators. My record as a member of the Maryland House of Delegates is clear. I've been a constant voice for conservative principles, and I've made it a priority to represent the needs and interests of our district. I hope and I know that I will never compromise principles, and I never will. I humbly ask for your support.
Thank you, Mike. Nicole?
On the City Council, I was part of a team that balanced the budget, paved the streets, removed blight, which made our community safer and the appearance brighter. I promise that I'm going to learn from our if I'm elected, I promise I'm going to learn from our senior members of the delegation, learn from the voters, and learn from committee chairs. I'll work closely with the delegation, with the county and local governments, not as a loner. Serve by bringing integrity, hard work, and creativity to the job. I'll increase funding for community colleges to better align job skills with the employer needs, increase funding for creative opioid crisis solutions, such as court-operated drug diversion programs, laws to help families force their loved ones into treatment and rehab programs, and also help with the state with school design and renovation to make them safer. I'm running because I believe I can be the best representative for the citizens of District 1C. With a record of success in business and public service, I've seen the value of working together as a team. By reaching out and truly listening, I have found time and time again that our citizens just want to be heard. They want a representative who cares about improving their lives, not pushing a personal agenda. What I will bring to this position is hard work, teamwork, and caring. I'm running because I want to serve. I have heard your concerns, and on June 26, Annapolis will hear them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That concludes our forum. I'd like to thank John Bone and his students from Allegheny College of Maryland, Chuck Dickin from WFWM at Frostburg State University, and Jeremy Irons, Legislative Committee Chair of the Chamber of Commerce, who is keeping time this evening. They are all a pleasure to work with and excellent community partners. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank our candidates for their participation and wish them all the best of luck. Early voting will be open from June 14th to June 21st. The primary election will be held on Tuesday, June 26th. The Allegheny County Chamber of Commerce encourages everyone to vote and to make informed decisions on Election Day. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Good job. Mhm.